Got something on your mind? Let's talk about it. My name is Koffee Dark N Sweet, and you are now tuned in to the Midnight Coffee Podcast. Here, have a sip. What up, though? And welcome to the Midnight Coffee Podcast. I am your host, Koffee Dark N Sweet, and I'm here with the beautiful Arabia Simeon. And this episode is called Democracy Where. So I wanted to, my intention with inviting Arabia is that she has an app that she's working on that she can tell you more about. But the purpose of it is to educate everybody, pretty much make education around politics accessible. So I entitled the episode Democracy Where because our inability to make educated choices when it comes to voting over time has turned our quote unquote democracy into an oligarchy. And for people who may not know what that is, it pretty much means that the wealthy pretty much controls the politics and therefore the government, and therefore decides a lot of our fate as far as how we interact with our government in our day-to-day lives. So when I heard, I met Arabia at TEDx, and I heard, her talk about her app and everything. I was super excited. I knew I had to get you here so you can tell us more about your project and why it's important to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, of course, and thank y'all for listening. Again, my name is Arabia, and I am building an app called POGO. POGO stands for Politics on the Go, and we're simplifying the voter experience for Gen Z and millennials. But the app is for everyone. We're really just targeting young people right now. The real vision for the app is to build a culture around voting and to really get young people engaged beyond federal elections. So really reflecting on the impact of the vote, reflecting on the impact of decisions that our politicians representing us, how it actually affects our neighborhoods and local communities is super important to the vision of POGO. I think I'm building this because I want people, like you said, to make informed decisions about candidates that represent them and who they actually put in office. And I also want people to know what's going on around them, because there's just so much nowadays where it's hard to sort through, and we're used to streamlined processes. So I just want technology to catch up. I want politics to catch up to where young people are when it comes to civic engagement.
It makes a lot of sense because I haven't actually voted in a while. For that reason, I feel like a misinformed vote was worse than no vote. And so I don't have personally I don't want to say any interest in politics. I know that the democracy can work. You know what I'm saying? I know there are several reasons why it's just not. And just like like you said, we used to streamline information. Just like I can Google something about a politician and just get so much crap. Like you said, at that point I gotta swim, and I'm not. Majority of our information is we don't have to swim. You know what I'm saying? Most of our answers are immediate, and you know what I'm saying? We get a lot of meat kind of right away. It's never like that with politicians or even politics itself. So even the different branches, I don't know what half of them kind of outside of the White House branches, like you said, the federal level. I don't know, like, what exactly does a mayor do? Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Why do we need one? To me, it just seemed kind of silly.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely a great point. I think that when it comes to politics, especially for young people, it's all about the motivation, right? We're just a generation that consumes a lot of information. So if the information just feels like it's fake news, or it's not really like reputable sources or anything like that, we're not going to necessarily fully believe it. But then there are people who don't have even the base level of civics education and will believe anything they read on the internet.
And that's also very harmful as well.
Yeah.
Consider, like I said, and you Google it. If you Google a politician, so many like headline media stories are going to come up outside of, what they actually stand for, or where they even grew up, or how they grew up, or these things are important. When you think about going, even like you think about going into business with someone, you wouldn't go into business with a stranger. So I can't, in good faith, vote for a stranger to run my government.
Yeah. And that is literally what I'm trying to build with POGO, that idea, like shifting the mindset to have people think about the implications, because that's really what that is, right? Like you just said, we won't go into business with a stranger, and you shouldn't go into someone leading your government if you don't even understand what they stand for.
Right.
And it is hard. I think there's a couple issues that we face as young people in this country, and just voters in general, because even my parents face this. Even their parents face this, right, with like voter suppression, things like that. That's really huge. The lack of civic education in this country. Most students or most people don't get civic education until like their senior year of high school, and that's if your school has that.
Mm-hmm. And thank God I took economics in college, because like I would never even know what oligarchy was, or the different types of what they actually meant.
Yeah, and then it's also going back to the implications thing, it's like understanding that your vote is your money as well, right? Like your tax dollars are determined by what goes where is determined by politicians. Understanding how that will affect your local community and the people that you care about, right, is important, and especially on the local level, right? You talked about what is a mayor. I always use this example in my pitches or when I'm talking to people, how I voted for the first time, and I didn't know what a comptroller was, because we vote for comptroller in New York City. That's where I'm originally from. Mm-hmm. And I was like, can I curse?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I was like, what the fuck is a comptroller? And
same.
Yeah, like, I was like, what is this? Like, I spent a whole day researching what a comptroller is. And they basically just handle, like, financials of, like, the city government, which is really important because, again, that's where your tax dollars are going, right?
Right.
There are a lot of things on the local level, even school board, judges,
Bingo.
Things we don't think about. And people, we don't even know these people are getting voted into office, right? We just think every judge is appointed like the Supreme Court. Absolutely not. Not every judge is like that. You get to vote. And these are people who are putting people in prison, right? These are people affecting our local neighborhoods. And it all goes back to the money. Honestly, a lot of the fake news and a lot of the campaigns and things that we see is all driven by money. And you should
propaganda.
You should know about when it comes to a campaign. You should know how many dollars are going into that. You should know who sponsors this, what corporations are sponsoring this campaign or endorsing this campaign, what super PACs are endorsing this campaign. And a lot of people don't know what super PACs are.
Right, I was just about to ask you what a super PAC is.
So essentially, in simple terms, nonprofits, unions, just like organizations essentially can pull their money together
and back a candidate.
And a lot of the time, these things can grow to be huge. So some people do it for good. Some people do it for their own reasons, whether it's like financial, political, things like that. Like a labor union may want to back a candidate because they actually want to be treated fairly or something like that. So everybody has their own reasons. Not all super PACs are necessarily bad in the eyes of society, but there are some super PACs where it's just like corporate dollars going into funding campaigns through super PACs because corporations can't necessarily endorse candidates and stuff. So it just gets into like a whole thing, but we're really just trying to bring visibility to that. And again, our whole thing is not trying to sway you on a candidate. We actually could care less who you vote for. What I care about personally as like a person building a nonpartisan app is that you're making informed decisions. And the only way to make informed decisions is with accurate and transparent information.
Bingo. I really liked a lot, all of that. It's what possessed you? But I also wanted to mention though, when you were describing a super PAC, I got this vision in my head. Like, one thing I do know is that politicians are bought, right? And most of them are groomed. Most politicians are kind of groomed from childhood ages to be politicians. And I thought, like, we do a lot of crying as disenfranchised communities, and we should be. You know what I'm saying? We have a lot to cry about. But in the same breath, it's like, well, if they can do it, then we can do those kind of things too. You know what I'm saying? We can groom our own politicians. We can, invest in children to be in those seats. For our own agendas, the same way that they do. And I just feel like it's the misinformation that people are just not even taking advantage of it, or how many like business owners, like wealthy Black and people of color business owners who can form these kind of super PACs and actually change things.
Yeah. I think there's definitely opportunity for that in the upcoming generations. I think millennials and Generation Z voters, we will see a shift where people running for office will be younger and younger. We're already seeing this. Like, for example, New York City, one of the mayoral candidates from the last mayor race was like this 26-year-old guy. And he was like queer, a rapper, and used to roll around on roller skates and stuff, and ended up getting on the ballot for mayor. And I always use this example. His name is Paperboy Prince, or their name is Paperboy Prince. I actually don't know their pronouns. But yeah, like they essentially got on the ballot just from social media and like leveraging
for themselves,
their network, and that is like the future. I think there will be more initiatives, and this is something that POGO wants to get into eventually as well. But there will be more initiatives trying to get young people into office and getting young people to care about running for office. Because, like you said, we have the talent, we have the drive, and we can do that same thing in our communities. And that's what we will need to do, as marginalized communities.
Just kind of take it back.
As young people, exactly, as young people. I just think, because I don't even think, when it comes to voting right now, I don't even think it's much about being marginalized as much anymore. And I think that is a hot take, but I'm speaking based off of like a statistical perspective, right? Majority of Americans will be mixed.
After
right,
over time.
No, not much. Like very soon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like very soon. And even when it comes to the voter demographic and in terms of eligible voters, by 2036, 62% of eligible voters will be millennial or Gen Z voters.
Right.
Right. So we're coming up on the next decade where young people will rule the class when it comes to voter demographics, right? And millennials and Generation Z voters are more left-leaning. They're anti-abortion. They're anti a bunch of things that are we haven't seen historically be like the majority. And that's why I say it's not, to me, not as much about like marginalized communities. I think there is, of course, always going to be a need to uplift those communities, and we need to create pathways for people to get into office. But I think it would be even stronger if we leverage like the power of young people. And young people, based off of stats and studies that we've seen, are already doing that work of supporting each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That I definitely agree with. I was just telling somebody earlier, like, community is changing, is becoming more, or more or less, like when we were younger, like the older generation was like made to be more so like respected, but that was pretty much it. So it was a lot of like separation when it comes to these different age groups, but we, like, as millennials, I don't think we behave the same way with Gen Z. We kind of like turn around and say, hey, here, here's some information, here's a hand, here's some, because we are learning that it is very necessary, I think. But is it, like, when you say like, when you described the Prince, Prince.
Prince.
Paperboy Prince, and from New York. And so I'm curious that, are we, everything kind of has a downside to it as well. So just as much as it's a great thing that more young people are, and we have social media now, so we can, leverage our own names and voices. But I feel like that's kind of how Trump happened, right? So it's like I'm listening to the music and seeing the content that young people are putting out, and it's scary to think of what could possibly happen,
Yeah.
going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I do think in the opposite direction, there are a lot of opportunities where it can get really bad. I personally think, though, like, the main priority should be getting people to actually vote. Right?
Yes, that's the only way it's going to operate as a democracy.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if this is, like, getting away from the question, but for me, it's like I don't know how to put this. So, like, as POGO, we try not to take, like, a stance
right
on certain things. And I'm still trying to figure out what that brand voice looks like. But I think personally, as, like, a person, I don't know, like, I'm liberal, or I believe in, like, the left. But I'm also, it's not conservative, because I'm not conservative. I don't know the word.
I get it.
Yeah, like, I don't really align with, like, political parties in general.
I've always said that problem too. It just kept me from the polls as well.
Yeah, and I think the real power in our generation is that we have diversity of thought, as well as, like, diversity in race, sexualities, all, gender, all those things, right? But I think the diversity of thought is going to be our greatest weapon as young people. And really, when I think about the right versus left, I think that will shift. I think the conversation will no longer be about political party, right? It's going to be about
policy.
Yeah. And I talked about this a little bit in my TED Talk, but, like, what candidates actually represent us when it comes to these policies and align with my views when it comes to these policies. Because a lot of us aren't for just one side or have, like, a strict party line that they're voting on, right? Like, you see this when it comes to the discussions around Joe Biden right now. He's not, young people don't want to vote for him on the left, right? For president in 2024. Right. The other option, a lot of people are saying the other option is Trump. Instead of making the conversation about how can we actually endorse a candidate that could replace Joe Biden that is strong enough to beat Trump. That's not the conversation. It's, the
lesser of two evils.
Yeah, like, it's like, well, we have to always do the lesser of two evils, and people are not, that is shifting. Like, people are angry. People don't want to do that. But if we don't vote, Trump gets into office, or someone like Trump, right? And honestly, a lot of the politicians aren't giving us what we need, regardless of Democrat or Republican.
That is so true. And the year I decided to stop voting was actually the year that Donald and Hillary was running, and I just was so tired of the lesser two evils conversation. And at that point, I had only ever voted for a presidential candidate, which was Obama, and I don't care. I voted for him because he's black, and I do it again. I don't, that's just facts. But in hindsight, like, after reviewing, like, the things that he actually did, he did make a lot of positive changes. He actually did. It just wasn't as broadcasted, as much as, his shortcomings and these kind of things. And people have these mixed views, which are okay to have. But to me, it was like Donald Trump was like the person who shows up at your door with a knife in his hand, like brandishing it, like, oh, I'm coming to kill you. And Hillary Clinton was the one who showed up with the knife behind her back, with some cookies in her hand. I'm like, I am not participating in it. It just felt like a freak show, you know? And I was just like thoroughly stressed out. And then when Trump won, I was even more stressed out because now I felt guilty, but there's no telling what Hillary would have done either. So, and the issue there was like, well, Hillary could have done a lot of craziness that we just didn't even know about because she's not Trump. She's not going to get on the microphone and say, hey, and, make fun of disabled people and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely think, 2016 was my first election, actually. I'm not old enough to been able to vote for Obama. I wish I was, though. I was so sad.
That was my first election. It was so lit.
I was trying to get all my siblings to go and vote, and they was not listening to me. So I was like, whatever, y'all. But yeah, I was so sad that I couldn't vote in that election. But yeah, that was my first election, and it was so depressing. Like, I always tell this story, and I legit didn't know what I was doing, even though I was civically engaged. Like, I got my ballot the day before elections, and I was just like, Democrat. I didn't know what anything was. That's the comptroller conversation. I was like, what the fuck is a comptroller? Like, I got to think about presidents and my local community in New York, and I'm going to school in Massachusetts, voting on the absentee ballot. Like, let's be for real right now. And the guilt and shame that you feel is a lot. Because there's this conversation where, like, it's not even conversation. It's more like just pressure. Like, if you don't vote, you can't be a part of the conversation. Right? And I agree and disagree. I do think there are levels to the conversation that if you don't vote, it necessarily, like, it's not that your opinion, like, you can't have an opinion. It's that your opinion doesn't hold certain, like, as much weight, in my opinion, because you aren't doing anything about it. Right?
But I do think you can do other than vote.
That's what I was going to say. So I think, like, the other side of it, though, is that you can be civically engaged. And I firmly believe that you can be civically engaged in other ways, because there are many people who are civically engaged and don't have the right to vote. Right? And that is never a part of the conversation. It's always, oh, you don't vote. So I think that is my stance on that. But I think going back to the original point, dang, I'm getting distracted now.
It's okay. This happens all. You should hear how many times I'm like, even me, like, damn, what was I about to say?
Yeah, I forgot what the original point was, but
I was talking. You were telling me the story of having to vote.
Yeah, so 2016 was crazy for me because I just didn't know what was going on. I knew I didn't want to vote for Trump. Did not want to vote for Hillary either, like, at all. I personally not a fan. And I just felt like okay, I gotta vote for Hillary because I don't want Trump. And I still felt guilt and shame because I didn't have the time to actually prepare ahead of time. And I was just like I'm over here exercising my right to vote, but
what does it mean?
Yeah, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything because I don't even know who half these people were.
I'm
right?
so stressed out to be backed into a corner like that.
Yeah, and touching on the point that you had mentioned earlier about, like, you don't know what Hillary could have done or anything like that. That's what we're experiencing with, like, Joe Biden and Kamala
I know.
Harris,
there's a bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes that I'm learning now that is like, that is, first of all, it's not even Democrat, like you said. So it's like a Democrat shouldn't be behaving like that.
Yeah.
Based on what we think we know about them.
Yeah. I think that definitely, I think it's also, like, the lack of accountability that politicians have to take when it comes to presenting facts to voters. It is deliberate in our system that isn't even ability to happen. I think if we had a voter, and it's something we want to provide through POGO, like just a voting history of every candidate presented in a file on our app.
Like who they voted for?
Yeah, or like what they voted on the past. Like a lot of presidential candidates, you can't just like wake up one day and want to be president, right? Like you have to have, well, most of the time you have to have some other position that you hold in the community, right? Like a lot of the things that Joe Biden has a strong stance on right now, he had a strong stance on back in like the 90s when he was in office, right? Or was that the 80s? Well, you're going to have to time check me on that because I might be throwing
You asking the wrong person.
Yeah.
Like, not me. What you say? Oh, 90s.
Right? Okay, cool. But yeah, like a lot of the things that he has strong stance on now, he had a strong stance on back then too. But because we don't have the voting history in our hand, right, when we're voting, we're not thinking about that. Same thing with Kamala Harris, like her strong stance on like policing makes a lot of sense because she has a direct connection to policing, right? And we're surprised when they make the decisions that they make. When they were planning on doing this from the 90s, like they've
Right,
been
that's like they're
planning.
playing in our faces, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's that. Yeah, I don't ever take like that stance. But yeah, it
It's
is
a lot of
basically
smoke and
that.
mirrors.
Yeah,
So it feels like a horror movie, to be honest, trying to make these kind of decisions
yeah,
without the proper information. There are so many things that I care about, you know, and like prison reform and these kind of things. So I feel like my mind and body would be better served actively supporting the change with my physical mind and body versus voting for somebody else to do it for me.
yeah. I think that is a valid stance. I do want to push you though, because I think voting is the only way.
I do want to though. If I had more information, I'd do it.
And you will, because POGO will be out, and you're gonna be one of our users. So, get on the wait list.
I was so excited when you said I was so excited when I heard about what you was doing. I was like, yeah, this is so necessary.
Yeah, and we want to make it fun too, right? Like we don't just stop at voting. We're trying to gamify the platform so that it's actually rewarding to be civically engaged. It's actually fun. It's a way that you can engage with your community, right? Like we want you to be able to share with your social media following or your social media community how you feel on certain policies, without having to have a discussion either, right?
Without starting a war argument. Yeah.
And I think making POGO, the way that we're developing it is it won't be a social media app, but allowing the integration comes back to that community building aspect that we're really focusing on. Like even within our beta, right? Like we're going to be launching a program very soon where we are engaging young people, starting in Michigan, because Michigan, if you don't know, has the high youth voter turnout. And it's at 36%, which is the highest across the country. And that's something we don't talk about, right? You would think Maryland or DC or Virginia would have the highest, but it's Michigan, in the middle of the country, and I'm starting in Detroit because just Detroit and Michigan area, the whole state, whatever, it just presents an opportunity where we can really build a case study and show people if we could do it in Michigan in the middle of the country where this is a swing state, right, where the blackest freaking city in the country is in this state. If we could do it here, there's no excuse why we can't do it anywhere else, right? Because this is I feel like Michigan is I don't know, it's personally it's not necessarily it feels like a boiling pot. Especially in certain areas.
It really is.
But I do think it just presents a really cool opportunity to really push that narrative of what does nonpartisan mean? What does getting young people voting look like? How can we raise the youth turnout percentages using POGO, things like that. So that's really important to me, building a case study and all that stuff here, and getting young people engaged.
So you said, earlier I asked you, and then I kind of glazed over. But what possessed you? What why? Have you always been into politics?
Yeah, I've always been against politics. Is
Funny.
what I tell people, because I never wanted to be a politician, and I still don't. People always oh, you love to argue, you love to debate, you should be a politician. I'm absolutely not. That is exactly that's not what a politician. No, that's not what it is.
That right there is proof why we need this app. Because what?
I think what I've always been passionate about is people. I think people in social impact and making change. I I really started POGO for voters like myself, for voters like you, for people in my neighborhood. By the time I turned 18, like 70% of the people I grew up with were not eligible to vote because they had records, criminal records, or like, you know, been in juvie since third grade. Like, you know, so I'm building POGO for that, for people to just be educated. Because I personally believe even if you aren't eligible to vote, you should still be able to know what's going on in your community, right?
Yeah.
Like, my family, I come from, on my dad's side, like family of immigrants, things like that. I want my family members and other people who may be immigrants or anything like that to be able to know what's going on in their local community, regardless if they can vote, right? So it gets really big in general, but for me, it's really about the people. Like, how can we inspire or empower voters to make informed decisions? How can we bring visibility to local communities in ways that isn't happening right now? Because the only thing we know, where we get our news, right? We get local community news. That's how you know what's going on in your community.
Right.
Or like, what's that app? That's mad stressful. Oh my gosh. There's this app that like tells you when like people get shot and like.
Yeah, I don't have none of that on my phone.
Yeah. You know, like that stuff is not helpful. The news is stressful.
It's not. I don't watch the news.
Yeah, nobody.
It feels like voting.
Yeah, and
actually, no, I will not be participating in this.
Yeah, like it's really stressful, and we already have a lot going on. So I'm just building POGO because I want to streamline that process. I want to give an opportunity for people to really understand what's going on around them, in a way that's not controlled by the government, in a way that's not controlled by big corporations and stuff. Like, we're a for-profit company, but we're starting from the ground up, and we have a very grassroots approach the way that we're building out. And we may have a nonprofit in the future, so who knows? But I am making the very big intention to partner with nonprofits and to work with organizations that are people first.
I'm glad you brought up how people with criminal records and prisoners can't vote. I think that's the most dehumanizing thing ever. And I look at the percentage of like people of color in America, right? And then the percentage of people of color in prison. And then we just talked about earlier how we vote judges in and they decide who goes to prison and this kind of thing. And like I said, that's part of the smoke and mirrors thing, and people don't see that. It's hard to see from, behind your cell phone or, watching the news every day. And you don't think, like, people don't think about these things as far as a political thing, right? But there is no way, it's so heartbreaking to me that people who were born here and are American and the people who these policies and things affect literally the most have no say whatsoever. And then most of them they get in the prison system. Nobody's calling them and talking to them and checking on them and all these things. We don't even know what they need. For the most part, they are cut off from the outside world. It's so dehumanizing. So that's one of the major reasons why I say, like, well, I want to vote. You know what I'm saying? I know that will have an effect on this problem. But most of the time, I'm not gonna lie, I just feel small. Like, as opposed to, it's like knowing the monster under your bed and not being able to touch it or, do anything about it. As much as it touches you.
Yeah. I think it's a valid point, and I think the biggest thing there is coming back to community, right? Like, as an individual, and that's really what voter suppression is about, right? Like, how can we suppress a community so that they can't
make decisions.
So they can't make decisions. And if we think as individuals, we're kind of laying down and letting the suppression happen, right? Like, we need to think about it on a community basis,
right?
And that's what I personally believe. Like, I personally think in local elections, right, I'm a vote for school board because I have nieces and nephews, right? I don't have no kids. I don't have kids in school or anything like that, but it matters to me because I care about my nieces and nephews, my little cousins. I care about my neighbors' kids, And if we take that approach, then it's no longer about I feel the shame as an individual. If I don't vote, I'm not showing up for my family members who are on labor strikes, right? If I don't vote, I'm not standing up for single parents or working moms who may need more assistance or rent stabilization, or my cousin who's in the military and may need certain rights when he becomes a veteran, things like that. Like, that is what your vote goes towards. It's the implication of it. We need to understand that, and if you don't understand it, then you're going to continue to think like an individual rather than thinking about your community and how your vote actually affects your community.
That was very nicely put. I was just talking earlier about what I consider to be like picking up a brick when you community is something that you literally have to build. So a lot of times I realized I was a shitty person because I was standing in the middle of a community, and not literally, but you know what I'm saying, and my community. I can claim it and say, oh, this is my community, right? But everything that goes on in it, I'm just complaining about. Oh, they not teaching our kids. Oh, they da-da-da-da-da. And all of these different people are buying up all of the land and blah, 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 blah. And then I'm like, well, what am I doing? I can't complain about something that I'm actively participating in. It's like cognitive dissonance, right? I can't complain about something I'm actively participating in. And silence is active participation. No response is a response, for sure. So you can't say like, oh, I don't want to have these experiences while you also continually engage in them and also do nothing at all about them. Like, it's not gonna add up. So like you said, we all should find ourselves some type of responsibility. Like, I don't want to necessarily say, oh, you have to vote, which I believe that we do. That's really, if you use the system of democracy properly, it can and will work. This I do believe in, though. And like I said, it was just the extreme pressure of ignorance. And not being willing to make a blind decision about something that's so important. So if you can't find yourself voting, then do something. Use your mind and body as an active participant in the solution, and in some way, please.
Yeah, like, there are so many opportunities to get involved. Like, volunteer at your local polling office, right? Like, polling locations need volunteers. That is how they operate, and that is also what aids suppression, like voter suppression. When there aren't enough poll workers, that polling location shuts down. Right now, people have to find a different place to go and vote. Right? We need people like that, volunteer at nonprofits. And I know not everybody has the privilege to volunteer or have the privilege of time. But like you said, there's always something that you can do. Like, for instance, growing up, I saw, like, my mom get up and, like, have to go and vote. And at a certain point, I feel like now my mom doesn't have, like, all the ability to go and do that. But even then, like, she made it a thing to watch debates and made it a thing to have conversations about politics around us. Like, when I think at the time I was, like, in elementary school when, who was that? Bush. It was, like, Bush presidency. And, like, I was like, I don't like George Bush.
It was so terrible.
And I couldn't vote, couldn't do anything. I was barely a part of the conversation, but I was in grown people's business. They were talking about politics. And I was like, what? I don't like Bush. And my mom was like, what you know about Bush? And I was just like, because I've been watching, like, hearing conversations, watching them, watch debates and stuff. And I just think we should all have that mindset. Like, okay, even if we're not going to vote, which I think you should, or whatever, right? Even if you don't vote, like, how can you be involved in your local community? And it's hard, like, especially for young people now. Like, inflation is kicking our butts. Like, rent is out the window. Like, there are a lot of things to be sad and depressed about and stuff. But the only way I personally think to even get some sort of change is to be a change that you want to see. So
I definitely agree with that. It's a huge part of like what I am doing, even with this. It's a lot of these kind of conversations people need to hear. They need to know, and it's a lot of things that should be common knowledge that it's just really not. So, but I did have you said something earlier, and I'm like, I hate when I try to make like a deposit, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put that right there because I remember later, and I never freaking do. I never do. You said, oh, you mentioned George Bush. It was so funny because what grade was I in? Like 5th or 6th grade. When George Bush was president, and I was making these like paper tattoos, like temporary tattoos out of jail pens with paper and stuff. And I made one that said "Fuck George Bush." I was in the Harborwood, so one of them little neighborhoods. It's the first time I ever been in detention in my life. They called my mom and everything, talking about I was making threats. I'm like, okay.
What?
Yeah.
That is crazy.
I can't have a political opinion. Fuck that dude.
No, seriously though, that like, why are you suppressing your
right?
Like, come on, you have freedom of speech.
They told me, you can go to jail for that. I'm like, what? Yeah, it was ghetto.
That's really crazy though. That's crazy. I commend you for doing that though. I would have been on the same time, and I think I was like. Honestly, I was like 6 or 7, so I couldn't even spell
couple more
that.
years, you would have definitely been like, fuck that dude.
I was definitely saying it, but I definitely couldn't write it. Right. Nah, but I definitely, I felt that way about a lot of presidents. I was excited for Obama. Even the second time I was excited for Obama. I love Obama as a human. I think just a person, like he's cool. I do think he's like Obama is for me is like Uncle Iroh if you watch Avatar, Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I know Avatar.
Okay,
I haven't watched it enough to know
he's
the
characters. He's the
characters.
firebender's uncle.
Okay.
Right? He's this guy who like everybody loves, like the audience, the people watching loves Uncle Iroh, and he's this wise old man. He gives the fire prince who's exiled like all this advice, and he basically takes care of him because his father exiled him out the land. But Uncle Iroh is a war criminal. So it's like we have all this love for him, but he's a war criminal, and that's how I feel about Obama. There are things that he has done that are like terrible, and that was never expected to come out of his presidency. But I do think, like you said earlier, like
there was a lot of positive on the back end.
There has been a lot of positive as well. So
yeah. It's a lot of that when
I rock with him though.
Yeah, most definitely, and like you said, it's a persona thing as well. Because for the first time, other than the only president like after him to do that was I think Trump, but for the first time it was like we knew who he was kind of. They called him like the first celebrity president or whatever, but it was like I was invested in Obama as a person.
Yeah, and it's really because he had, and this goes back to what I was talking about, like integrating with social media and just like online community, things like that. He was the first president to have a digital campaign that extended beyond TV and radio, right? Like we had people on Facebook talking about Obama, like especially the second one. Like the first one, I feel like he was just everywhere. Like it was a viral moment. Like even
the fact that he even existed was
yeah. Like it was just a viral moment, and I think we can do the same thing with POGO. Like that's what I'm trying to recreate, but like not about presidents, not about anything like that. I'm not a politician. I'm just out here trying to give y'all information. So
I appreciate it. Do you think voting will ever get to the point where we can do it on our phones?
People always ask me this. I think there are companies going after that.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of security things that would need to be in place for us to even be able to do that, and I don't think we're there yet. I won't say that there's never going to be a possibility, because I think there's always possibility when it comes to technology. We just have to have because the thing is, it's not about the voting on the phone, right? It's about how do we protect that data? How do we know that is actually accurate, right? We've seen this before with previous presidents where they're trying to like manipulate
the numbers. But I'm saying they do that when we go in person.
Exactly.
So it's like,
yeah, but when it comes to, I think the biggest threat when it comes to mobile voting that I've seen people talk about is like other countries being able to hack our systems and stuff. And I think there's possibility for that. I just think we don't have the regulations. We don't have, like, the internet is barely regulated. Like, they're just now adding regulations to internet and AI and things like that. Like, I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're going to get there eventually if we get our stuff together.
Heavy on the if.
Yeah, the technology is being built though. So it's about, like, when you're building an app like this, it's about the adoption of it. Like, it's not about the actual technology. If the technology is good, that's cool. But if these local governments don't adopt it, because it would have to be like a local government partners with this organization to bring it to the next election, right? Because they would have to have, like, a lot of legal situations figured out before they do that.
I appreciate your mission and that you are a wealth of knowledge. You said did something cool today.
Oh, yeah. I was on this panel. Michigan Founders Fund is this organization that's basically building a network of founders here in Michigan. They've grown the community into, like, the thousands. And it's a really cool organization. So we basically, as founders, give, like, a 1% pledge to helping and supporting Michigan Founders Fund after we become successful. And it's just a pledge. So, like, if you don't ever reach the thresholds that they have in place, you don't have to give 1% of your company and stuff like that. But anyways, they sponsor a lot of events when it comes to speaking to students. They have, like, internship programs and stuff like that. I was on a panel today to talk about entrepreneurship with students from Michigan Technology University. And it was actually really cool. It was actually a international crowd, which I wasn't expecting. Yeah, it was cool people from, like, Ghana and Nigeria and stuff like that. It was nice. Like a bunch of other countries as well. And we just talked about entrepreneurship, our journeys, networking, and how to get into entrepreneurship, tech. And I was really honored to even be asked to be on the panel because I was on a panel with, like, basically, like, superstars. I call them in Detroit. Like, for instance, Katrina, she does marketing at Techstars, which is a really big accelerator. It's like the number one accelerator, I think, in the country, or maybe number two. Y Combinator is another big one. Moody from Brand XR, he's actually on Renaissance Top 100, I think, like, Hot List or something like that, like the up-and-coming companies. Nice. And then my friend Jad, who works at this company called, I believe, Hum, which is also a really big startup out here in Detroit. And then me representing the young founders and building POGO, a social impact company. So I've just been doing more speaking engagements like this, and it was another one that I could, like, get my mission out there, inspire the next generation, and, like, pay it forward as well.
Nice. So how can we get on your waiting list?
Yes. So there's a couple of different ways. I'm going to say 2 in 1. Go to POGO.vote on Instagram. Follow us. Thank you. And then click that link in our bio. And you can sign up for our wait list there. Yeah, in the wait list, I'm actually building out this with the launch of our public beta, but we're gonna be adding, like, a Discord channel and, like, opportunities for you to be a part of, like, our development. Essentially, we want to treat our beta group as, like, community designers, essentially. Nice.
That's very, very, very nice. And where can we find you personally, if you want to be found?
Yeah, you can find me. No, this is kind of cliche, but you can find me on LinkedIn. Please, I'm trying to build my LinkedIn following low key. Arabia Simeon, that's my name. Or you can find me on Instagram at Ara, ARA, the THE Mecca, MECCA.
Nice. Thanks for joining us and spending the night with me. Coffee out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
I learned a lot, and that was the reason why I wanted you here, because you put a lot of the different things that I have been feeling and kind of knowing inherently into, like, words and knowledge and, like, a tangible resources. It's just like your thing, apparently.
I try. Cool. Wow, that was faster than I expected.
Yeah, it did go by pretty fast. It went. Yeah.
Great.
How's Because her name is a country as well.
No, almost. No. But her name is Ayana.
How's Ayana?
Both A's. She is good. She's a founder. Not a founder. She's a farmer, and her farming season is ending. So she's about to have more time.
She's in farmer. Cause
no. She's a farmer.
Okay, so I did hear you right.
Yeah, she's a farmer, and then she also works at MEJC, which is Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition.
Nice.
So she's really in that sustainability, make the world healed and stuff kind of world. And now since winter time is hitting, she's closing up the farm and stuff. So before she was working 2 jobs and never had time to do it. So now she's about to chill.
I'd like to know more about that. Maybe she can come tell us what she do.
Yes, please.
I just